Welcome everyone to the Clark County Fire District 6 Board of Commissioners meeting and workshop. It's February 16th, 2021, and we are going to start with a 5:30 workshop. And just so you know, when the workshop's completed, we will go ahead and move into our regular meeting and regular agenda. And with that said, we have two different issues that we're going to discuss tonight in our workshop. And the first one is 1805's merger with 452. And we have Judson McCauley, who's the president of 452, and Casey Taylor of District 6, who is the vice president of the local representing Fire District 6. And with that said, we'll turn it over to Judson and Casey and give us a little update, please.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Chief, for having us. So, yeah, my name is Judson McCauley. I am the president of IAFF Local 452. This has been my fourth year as president of Local 452, and nearly 2 days of labor work with Local 452, 2 decades of labor work with Local 452 since I was a member there. And years ago, actually, just anecdotally, I was a member of Local 1805 when I worked out at Fire District 3 in 1999 when I started there. So I worked there a couple of years, moved to the city of Vancouver, and I've been at the city of Vancouver ever since. Just presently, I'm a fire captain on Engine 7 for the city. Like I say, I've done labor work for a good long while. I did our political action work. I worked as a shop steward for Local 452, and then eventually president of the local. So, and Casey, you want to give them your background? I'm sure everybody on the call knows your background, but why not, right?
Yeah, thank you, Judson. So I started with Clark County Fire District 6 back in 2001, was hired by then Fire Chief Brad Losbeck, and kind of did some things for the union. I was a shop steward for a while, and then also worked as the Muscular Dystrophy Association fill-the-boot coordinator for Local 1805, and then just kind of the opportunity presented itself with the merger, and I had the ability to try and step up, so I ran for unit vice president of the FD6 bargaining unit, and was awarded that spot. So I'm happy to be involved and looking to keep things progressing at Clark County Fire District 6.
So, just by way of background for how we arrived where we have arrived now, about 10 years ago, Ryan Reese and I had gotten together, and we were talking about that there is this trend of merging smaller locals with larger locals. There's some obvious, as Commissioner Pfeiffer could probably tell you in his experience over there at Tuolumne Valley, there are efficiencies created, obviously, by the locals merging, whether that's through costs of fees, and services that we have to deal with. We're oftentimes doing things in parallel, dealing with the same issues, and I think, it's easily illustrated. We could talk about some things that we've talked about in labor management that that one agency or the other is dealing with in parallel. That by working together, we've actually been able to get to the bottom of an issue a little sooner. So creating those efficiencies, that greater workforce of people to draw from and gain knowledge from, and actually allow opportunities for people to participate at a higher level within the organization. So, and then internally, there are some benefits to us with respect to the structure of the IAFF and voting strength, and then the Washington State Council of Firefighters and our voting strength there, and kind of how we deal with the internal politics of those issues. And furthermore, down here in Southwest Washington, statewide, and this is probably not something that is lost on anybody, Southwest Washington kind of tends to be organizationally, at least for us, in statewide organization, an island. And we have been able to, through our kind of collective, even prior to merging locals and creating those efficiencies, to recognize where the holes were and to put representatives on committees at those statewide organizations where we otherwise might not have. I, as an example, am a trustee on the MERT board, of which you probably are all familiar with. Ryan Reese. He's now the vice president of the merged local. Ryan is Washington State Council Firefighters 5th District rep. So, we've been able to kind of maybe at least steer a little influence down this way for the benefit of our members and kind of collectively for Southwest Washington. So that's kind of the history. It took us a long time to get here because of a variety of issues and reasons. We all are obviously negotiating contracts, or it's not a good time for one agency or the other because of ongoing issues. And this was a good time. COVID actually, the happy accident with respect to COVID is we're able to have a little bit of time to work on this project and come together. So that was the history. And interrupt me, by the way, if you have questions on anything. So, doing it this way, it's obvious I can't see, a hand raised or any body language. So just tell me to be quiet and ask your questions. So, but I would say that the structure you won't see a whole lot of difference from what you've seen with a representative labor group thus far. We've broken it up so that we have a unit vice president, which Casey is, the unit vice president of that local, or the unit rep effectively. And under him, in our organizational structure, works the representative shop stewards. And it's actually the exact same number of shop stewards we had previously. So he has Casey, it's Max Olson, Andrew Hodson, and Tony Losbeck, correct? I'm not missing anybody, am I?
No, that's correct.
Okay, so we have those three folks, and then Casey's the unit rep, and then of course Ryan is there as the overall locals vice president. And then the greater structure, of course, we have principal officers, myself as the president, Ryan's the vice president. We have a secretary and a treasurer and a political action director, and then Vancouver has its shop stewards and unit rep, and then North Country has its. They actually have a unit VP that functions in both capacities because of their member strength or the number of members they have. So that's essentially the structure. And so the bargaining units themselves won't see much of a functional difference. So and let's see, I know I have a few things on my list here. I want to make sure to answer some questions that were posed that the commissioners may want. So want to hear about. So we talked about some of the benefits for the local, the structure of the local. The reason essentially is that need to create some efficiencies, and frankly, it's good business financially for us too, right? So let's see, the bargaining, with respect to bargaining, how it will happen is Ryan Reese, as the vice president of the local, is a function of his duties as prescribed in the Constitution and bylaws are to oversee bargaining for all units. But generally, the way it will work is you will have a unit vice president of each bargaining unit. And so in this case, Casey Taylor will work closely with Ryan. They'll work collaboratively to come up with the proposals and agenda, and work with the district to come up with dates and times that work for everybody, get together and meet. And so again, you kind of functionally won't see much different from the way it worked before. And then Vancouver, North Country, kind of similarly will work that way. At times, if there's a need or there's a subject matter expert, like as an example, I'm a trustee on the Vancouver Firefighters Union Health and Welfare Trust. If it's a healthcare issue and you folks or the local bargaining team want me to come in and speak to a particular issue that I have an area of expertise in, I'll probably participate there, but probably won't on a day-to-day basis on the bargaining side of things. So again, bargaining will probably look just like you've seen it before. So and labor relations wise, we've had a couple meetings that I've sat in on to kind of come up to speed on the issues, because I don't want to be caught out being asked a question by the membership that I don't have an answer to. I would rely heavily on Casey and the shop stewards to know the answers to most of those questions. But I like to be informed, and actually it's been a really great opportunity for me to come into the organization, listen to what the issues are, and kind of provide a fresh look at things. And I think that the meetings have gone great, and they've been very collaborative. And I've appreciated Chief Maurer accepting me into that and allowing me to, participate. It's been, I think, a really positive experience. So now what kind of questions can I answer for you? I'd love to answer questions.
I was just wondering how many total members you have now, Judson.
So with the hiring of the 11 new District 6 bargaining unit members, we're at I think it's 241. Our representative count, because we get, at the international, so this is where this matters for us in the international when we kind of come together, is we have active retirees, and so we had 253 for the with respect to vote count there. So, but 241 actual working suppression members of all bargaining units. So,
is that comparable to like Olympia, Tacoma, some of the bigger departments? Do you know?
It would be bigger than Olympia, smaller than Tacoma. Tacoma, I think, is about 340, I want to say, or 360. Spokane is somewhere in the 325 represented members, I believe. So not far off, very similar, but they also generally staff at a higher ratio. So I would say the service area of obviously Vancouver, Clark County Fire District 6, and then of course North Country is far greater area served and probably a greater population served collectively.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any other questions I can answer for you guys? Anything? I mean, it can be local related. It can be personal. I'm sure Chris Pfeiffer probably has, maybe you have something from the old days when we worked for Fire District 3 as residents and interns.
That's right. No, I appreciate you coming on here tonight and giving an overview of how things work and operate. I would expect that things will maintain fairly status quo from 1805's perspective, and I appreciate the overview and the idea of creating efficiencies. I am familiar with a consolidated local, if you will, and where I work at 12th and Valley, we represent 12 different departments. So I have an understanding of sort of how that piece comes together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I might need your advice more than you need to hear from me today. That's a lot of balls to juggle, right? A lot of things to keep in the air.
Yeah. There's more vice presidents.
Yeah, I imagine.
Casey Collins, do you have anything? Are you still with us in your truck?
Yeah, I'm with you. I was trying to make sure that I didn't ask anything that's obvious or anything like that. Okay. I guess you're getting a lower number, and with that comes better prestige, doesn't it? With the local number.
Well, that's there's a lot to be said for that lower number. Just with respect to when you're in the labor circles and you're out there, having the conversation, just with the folks there and when you go to a convention or something. But really, I think here's what the lower number brings. We've had a lot of time to establish the local, and I think Local 452 has been very successful, not just for Local 452, but broad scope. We've done a lot of work. I don't know if you folks remember I-790, Mark Johnston, who was president of this local. He actually brought that to the State Council, Washington State Council of Firefighters, and made that happen, which became a statewide initiative that created the Left 2 pension board. And now Left 2 is one of the best, in terms of funding, best funded pensions in the nation. I mean, it's looked to as a model for funding. So because of that pension board, because we took people who were truly interested in maintaining that pension and keeping an eye on it, and put them on that board. So, and he actually, to this day, as a founding board member, remains on the pension board. So, I think we're fairly forward thinking and inclusive, and I think we'll continue to do a lot of that work. But now we were able to do it in probably a little bit greater capacity because we have some a larger workforce. So I think the low number is great. I think all it brings is a little bit of time and a little bit of expertise. But it's like anybody else. There's a lot of education yet to be had, I think, for us, and I've learned that working through this process. But this process has been super positive for us, and I don't know if Casey Taylor has anything to add to that, but I've been really happy, and I sometimes have to remind myself we're only a couple months in since we actually literally came together as a local, and I think we're making really good strides in the relationship with the district, and I think we are doing good work together, and so.
Well, thanks for addressing that. I knew that there was some thought behind it, and it comes with a little prestige with that. And the organization has a long history of Vancouver Fire and all the historic pictures and everything that goes along with that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I don't know if you know this, that's typically how the IFF does it. You go with the lower number when you merge locals, but also they retire 1805. They don't let anybody else have 1805. It's like hanging the jersey in the rafters. They retire the number, and sometimes, there have been locals that have petitioned to have it back because of one reason or another. Things separate. I don't anticipate that happening, but that is one thing they do. So 1805 will always be and have been Clark County Fire District 6. So,
kind of off the subject, but not really. I would assume that you guys, the state council, is keeping an eye on what's happening in Olympia concerning Left One and TERS One merger. And is the state council taking a position on that?
Yeah. So I won't speak for the legislative team. I'll just speak to what little I know right now. This is as you know, I'm sure, constantly, we're constantly fighting this battle. It's a recurring battle, and the state council has no interest in putting Left One in any other pension system. So I'll say that. I mean, Left should remain Left. If one day something happens and Left 2 absorbs Left One because there are no more members left, or the members of Left One find a benefit to it, I don't know. Then maybe that happens. But the state council is not interested in Left going into PERS, to my knowledge, and that's. I don't foresee that happening. That would be a real. The legislators who would vote for that would probably alienate themselves from the firefighters in the state of Washington collectively pretty quickly. So I don't know that we'll see that happen.
Yeah, I know the state.
Anything can happen. Money talks, I suppose.
Yeah. The state fire commissioners are debating whether we're going to take a position on it or not. I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's really the only people at advantages, I think, are, this is just one man's opinion, are the PERS retirees. So I'm not sure how I see it would benefit the Left retirees, but so we'll see.
Thank you. I was just curious.
Yeah.
I had one more question, if I could, Commissioner Collins here.
Yeah.
When you go to bargain, do you guys bargain with the city manager or the city attorney or both, or how's that work?
Well, so the city, I mean, obviously, the employer group gets to pick its representative team, but usually, I'll just say what I have experienced. The other side of the table is the city usually brings an attorney. Maybe a city attorney, may not be a city attorney, kind of dependent upon who their staff is at the time. It is usually a designee of the city manager, which typically has been the assistant city manager, and then an ops chief is usually the chief from the department that is bargaining, and usually there's some HR staff to include the HR director. So kind of an amalgamation of department heads that generally do touch our organization is how they do it. They seem to create a pretty effective team that way. Hard to get everybody's schedules together on their side, though, because they're so diverse in their work group. But aside from that, that is essentially, they usually bring an attorney. Not always. They actually haven't always brought an attorney. Probably with the contracts I've bargained, I would say 50-50. Sometimes they leave the attorney out entirely.
That's not a bad thing.
can usually start without one for sure, and if you have an impasse, that's usually where it ends up.
Yeah, I found this is just anecdotal, but I found that when the attorney's in the room, not good, bad, or otherwise, but it's usually slower because the city doesn't usually, if they're hiring an outside attorney anyway, there's not a lot of attorneys from down here, so it's usually somebody who has to travel from Seattle area or something like that, and so it usually winds up slowing it down a bit. So not to say it's bad. I mean, whatever. An attorney's fine. I don't necessarily have an issue with it, but it does seem to slow it down. And I think my perspective on bargaining is, I think generally I try to remain as collaborative as possible, understanding that both sides have an interest, and we both have to give a little bit to get to the middle. I think that's a fairly practical way to look at it, and if we can do that without an attorney, which I think generally you can, makes it easy. So,
with the budget of Fire District 6, it's very transparent what kind of funds we have available and what we can spend on labor and what we can spend on equipment. With the city, you've got a whole piece of pie and many people tugging at that pie. Isn't that an arbitrary number that they come up with, what they're going to fund police and fire with?
Well, so you're right. It's very difficult to pin down sometimes, which makes it hard to bargain. I would just say that the local looks at a broader picture and the city's ability to afford whatever. So, because yes, the city can the budget can look like X, but they have the ability to move money around a little bit within the scope of certain things. So, yeah, we usually take a broader look at the city's finances and approach it from that perspective, because the budget gets reset every 2 years, and actually annually they do a supplemental, so they can kind of adjust. And frankly, I think what all of us know is the city knows going into it, just like we do, kind of our end point, what we can afford to do. And so, that's why I take a generally broader look, and when we're with respect to bargaining. So try to keep it a little more global.
Right. I'm just curious how that worked with what they can afford to do and what you are bound to do by comparables and bargaining in good faith. I mean, sometimes those are two different numbers.
Yeah. So because the city is the way, the budget is the way it is, we do have comparables that we have outlined, that we've predetermined, that we use with respect to a certain boundary of rules, right? And so sometimes those comparables change, but we've already identified, this is how we'll identify those comparables, 50% to 150% of a population metric and a oh gosh, I'm forgetting the term, for the not the budget, but the value, the assessed valuation. So, sorry, it escaped me, but so those comparables kind of may change from time to time, but at the end of the day, what all parties generally know is things such as wages, obviously, are pretty easy if we've already predetermined the comparability. So they can kind of predict where they'll be, and we can kind of predict where we'll be. And so actually that's kind of usually the least of our, in terms of like what we're up against or a conundrum that we find ourselves in, it's not usually about wages. It's usually about an operational issue. So because the city really can predict pretty reliably with respect to those comparables, where they're going. And I mean, it's the same, generally wages are the easy part. I'll say that, just in terms of predictability within comparability. But where comparables kind of vary a little more is specialties and some of those things, schedule, healthcare. So we try to kind of still use that target reference, but that's usually how we do it. And yeah, the city budget is, with respect to the fire department budget, when we bargain, really isn't something we talk a whole lot about, to be frank. We just, we know where the city's at financially. It's pretty easy to determine, and then they build their future budget based on the bargaining of this current contract cycle, and they've already identified where they want to stay for themselves, so they try to keep it there. So
can you say how long of a contract do you normally negotiate?
Sure. 3 years is what we've been typically what we typically agree to. I actually, in the 20 years I've worked at the Vancouver Fire Department, we've always had a 3-year contract. It's kind of a nice happy medium. Anything longer than that, and even at 3 years, more than the local, usually the city's kind of itching to make some changes because there's oftentimes turnover in the chief positions or administrative positions in the city, so people kind of want to make some changes. But I think anything shorter than that, and you're putting a lot of effort in to just sit right back down at the table and do it all over again. So 3 years seems to kind of be the sweet spot.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions from the board or staff? Yeah, hearing none, I want to thank both you and Casey for spending some time with us tonight and kind of giving us a little synopsis of the benefits and where you think things are going. And on behalf of the board, I know we want to maintain a good relationship. I think we have that now, and we want to maintain that going forward, no matter if it's 1805 or 452. So appreciate your time, gentlemen. If you'd like to keep listening, you're more than welcome. But we are going to move forward to the second part of our workshop, which is apparatus replacement plan, and I'm going to turn it over to Chief Maurer and Chief Newberry, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Luspec, and President McCauley and Vice President Taylor. You guys can just hang up on your end, and we won't lose you on our end.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you everybody for having us. And I'll tune into the YouTube channel here. So I've got it on the other. I got muted on the other end. So thank you very much.
Thanks for being with us. Okay, and tonight Chief Newberry is going to present the apparatus replacement plan to the board.
Thanks, Chief Maurer, Mr. Board Chairman, and board members. So Chief Maurer asked me to put together a little bit of a synopsis of some of the recommendations that we'll be bringing to the board over the next several months, this year, 2021, and also 2022. And so the first thing that we wanted to talk about was the fact that we have a new pickup coming for the training division and a new pickup coming for the battalion chief. That will help them meet the mission in both training division and some of the needs of the battalion chief. And we anticipate that the battalion chief rig is going to be hopefully arriving in March, although that date seems to be a little bit transient right now with everything going on with COVID. The supply chains at the factory have been disrupted, so that date has been pushed back a couple of times, but we're still hoping for next month. And quite honestly, we don't know exactly when the training pickup is going to be here. They have not given us a date on that one. So, but they have been ordered, and they are in the works. Working with Chief Baum and Chief Russell and Arnie to work out the details on how to configure those vehicles right now. So, and then coming up for the remainder of 2021, Chief Maurer plans to bring a proposal to the board to surplus a certain number of vehicles that have just met the end of their serviceable life. 627 is the Honda CR-V. She'll be talking to you, I think, this evening about that one, but that one was due in 2016. We've kind of been holding on to it because it's been such a solid rig. Unfortunately, it's got a transmission problem, so we're not sure we want to sink any more money into that, but I'll leave that to Chief Maurer to speak with you about. 606 is engine 151. That's a 1996 Pierce Sabre that's scheduled in 2011 to be replaced, so that's 10 years ago. And we're hoping to surplus that probably in March 2021. We'll bring that to you once the academy is completed. We've been using that for just have an extra rig for the academy. 602 is EMS 61. It's one of the training vehicles. It's a 2006 Expedition. We're hoping to present that to you to be replaced when the new training pickup arrives, which we're not exactly sure when that's going to be, but as soon as it is, this year, hopefully. Also, we're considering, but we're not committed to yet, 611, which is training 61. It's another 2006 Ford Expedition. We're just waiting to see how COVID passes, to see what the needs of the training division are. It's also a very old vehicle and probably needs to be replaced, but we want to be conscious of spending money, so we're just holding off on that one to make a final decision until we see what presents and what this training division, what their needs are. Whether we're going to ask you to purchase a new vehicle or we're going to keep that one in the fleet. But it is over 15 years old, so we'll see what they have to say. So that was for 2021. In 2022, we have a number of vehicles that we will probably be bringing to you to surplus. 6-14 is Brush. Brush 63 actually it's Squad 63 now, actually. It's a 2000 Ford F550. It's obviously now 21 years old. And on the arrival of the new pumper in 2022, we will be asking the board probably to surplus that. That was due last year. 609, which is engine 67. It's a 2000 Pierce Sabre. It was due in 2015, so we're about 6 years past due on that one. And we'll probably be bringing that one to you in January of 2022 once our second new pumper arrives. 6-31, which is the rig that PIO 61 is driving. It's a 2007 Ford Expedition. We've talked about that a number of times on how to replace that vehicle, but we'll determine that at the time. But that's looking like 2022. And then a new Squad 61, we plan to spec that. It's likely going to be similar to Arnie's work truck, but without the tank and the pump. It will be used as the frontline squad. And then 641, which is current squad, has a tank and a pump. It's a brush truck. Operations would like to continue to use that as a seasonal resource and as the reserve for that vehicle, for the Squad 61's vehicle. And we'll be bringing that to you next year. And then, obviously, next year we'll hope to start speccing a new ladder truck for delivery in 2023. And then some other items of need that we have that we'll likely be coming to you to ask for some support on are a scissor lift, which we've needed for a long time. We used to have kind of a mobile stairway that you would push around the station at 61. Obviously, it's not very deployable to the other stations. We have a trailer, so we would like to consider purchasing a scissor lift of some kind that can help us service the light poles at all the stations, replacing the lights and the modules in those light poles, replacing some of the infrastructure that's on the ceilings of all the stations, including like the wireless access points, sprinklers. We've got just a ton of stuff up there, like cord reels and just all kinds of stuff that's on the ceiling, the heaters and stuff. And also, we really need a parking lot sweeper. Especially with Station 63, we found that would be very useful. And we don't know if that's going to look like a standalone apparatus, or if it's an attachment to some vehicle. Maybe it's an attachment to Arnie's truck. We've looked at those. Or an attachment to some other accessory vehicle to help us maintain the appearance of all the stations. Something that's transportable, we can get around to all the stations. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're looking at, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Chief Newberry, Commissioner Pfeiffer here.
Hey there.
Is there a number of brush trucks that you hope to maintain in the fleet? I heard you talk of a reserve one for sort of seasonal use. With the surplusing or the proposed surplusing of the current Squad 63, how many would that leave you, or what is your plan there?
So Squad 63 is pretty old. It's a 2000 Ford F550, so it's 21 years old. The fire chief and staff have talked about how we maintain that protection. You make sure we have that resource, and we believe wholeheartedly in having a brush resource. It's hard, however, to justify purchasing another brush resource and having two of them. And so operationally, we would consider putting some other type of vehicle in service as a main line for Squad 61, and then having the brush truck put in place, maintain that for forever, really, but maintain a brush truck to put in during this summer hot, the fire season, or during, like right now with the snow, to have a four-wheel drive vehicle that can get around, or to get into, some, tight spots. Maybe even the squad would have four-wheel drive capabilities, but regardless, keeping the brush truck available so that we can take care of that hazard as well, but not necessarily having it out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week,
right.
365 days a year.
Great. Thank you. And lastly, how many total reserve engines do you hope to ideally maintain in stations? Is the current practice to have one in each station, or what is the vision there?
Well, the current practice is we've had eight pumpers in service, one reserve in each station. Everything that we have experienced reveals that's probably not necessary. Whether that is Survey and Ratings Bureau that has basically told us you have way more apparatus than we can give you points. You're never going to lose points on your reserve apparatus because we have so many of them. To the reality of when we have broken rigs, how deep do we go? And we don't ever go so deep that we are in the lowest end of our rigs. For instance, engine 151 or engine 67. We just never go into those rigs. So arguably, we have at least one and maybe two apparatus that we could surplus and reduce our fleet, therefore reducing our maintenance costs and reducing the potential for having to replace those vehicles, which that's where the biggest dollars are, obviously, is when you end up having to replace those vehicles. If you're committed to 8 pumpers and one of them goes out of service because it's too old, you're looking at $600,000 to replace it. It's just, we don't believe that we need to be that deep.
Right. Okay. And lastly, when we use the term reserve, are those units 100% outfitted, as in they're ready to go the moment they need to be activated, or is there equipment that has to be moved to make those response ready?
So I would be guessing on telling you exactly what the percentages of what they're prepared for, but I would say 75 to 85% ready to go. There's the big ticket items we move over, such as perhaps an extrication tool, or some of those big ticket, maybe it's even 85% is a better number, because I can't think off the top of my head what gets moved over, but it's mostly ready.
Right. So, no, I understand. Then it's just so we're maintaining a lot of additional equipment, hose and nozzles.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay. Perfect.
Yeah, and of course, when that hose goes out of service, you're talking about it going out of service on 8 rigs rather than maybe 6 rigs, and so it's a pretty big expense.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you for answering those questions. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Chief Newberry, could I just add one thing to that?
Please.
So just to, so it's clear, but our current fleet is 8 pumpers. So we want to reduce the overall fleet to 7 pumpers, and we're comfortable with that, with transitioning from the combat volunteer program to a support services program. And then also changing some of our deployment models, where we're looking at adding a truck and different deployment options. So it's reducing our fleet by 1 apparatus, 1 pumper.
And that makes sense, and that still leaves us a pumper for cadets or if we have an academy without having to take one of our reserves? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, so 61 right now would have one frontline and two reserves, and then the other 62 would have a frontline and a reserve, and 63, once they have the truck, would have a truck, a pumper frontline, and then a reserve pumper. So we have one for cadets and training and that kind of stuff too.
Okay. Makes sense. So I couldn't talk you guys into taking the that's not me. Taking the slide out pump out of a rig and put it into another rig. No.
We haven't committed to anything, but I think with Chief Russell changing the deployment on what those squad units do to the lower priority calls, that will help. But we do realize that we do need that brush rig still in the district.
And so in the summertime, like Chief Newberry was talking about, if the fire danger is high, you may run the brush rig in place of whatever of the squad. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, Chief Newberry, do you want to take that one?
Sure. We've discussed how important it is to have a brush truck. That we don't want to be in a summertime without a brush truck, but it's pretty hard to commit to having two brush trucks. So because a brush truck is about, the last time we bought one, I think it was about $285,000. So I'm guessing it's probably closer to $300,000 or $320,000 roughly to do a brush truck. Whereas getting a pickup truck that's similar maybe to Arnie's service truck is a lot less than that. And because we don't need that fire protection on that truck 24/7, 365, we feel like we can put a less expensive, more efficient vehicle in its place during 8 or 9 months out of the year, and then during the other 3 months of the year during the fire season, we can move the brush truck into its place and run it to hit those higher risk seasons.
Okay. So if you replaced it with a vehicle similar to Arnie's, would there be room for turnouts and SCBAs and that kind of thing?
That's the important part about something similar to Arnie's. I'm not saying exactly like Arnie's or anything like that, but we talked about that in what we actually need. It would be great if we could just put gear on an SUV and send it out the door. But the reality is that we're not quite that, I guess, independent and not needing that squad resource for firefighters and some, air packs and things like that. So if we had a rig that had compartments like Arnie's does, yes, it would completely satisfy that need, minus the cost of a pump and a tank for brush.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Collins?
Yeah, I'm here. I just looking back in history. We've fought for the water on the squad, and now it sounds like the model has gone away from that. And so, I just want to know how many times water has been deployed out of Squad 61, and evidently it's not worth it to pack around that water. You must have some data to back that up.
So I'll leave that alone. But yes, we are very comfortable.
Yeah, we debated this last time, and right after it went down, it was used down there in Frenchman's Bar when that was the only thing that could get there. I know it was mutual aid, but I think there's value in being able to get somewhere to extinguish something. Clark Fire and Rescue just experienced an access road they couldn't get to with an engine, and they had two lesser rigs like brush tenders or whatever. They finally got to it, and anyway, I don't know. Accessibility is key.
Well, you're totally right. Why don't we still have that facility? I'm echoing pretty bad. Hello? Okay. Yeah, we think that versatility always pretty important to have the brush truck available to access those roads or to take care of putting the wet stuff on the red stuff during the brush season. And so I think that keeping a brush truck in service is absolutely critical, that we have that. It's just we're not sure that it needs to be two of them. Chief Maurer, I'll turn that back over to you.
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember is, although in the past we always had that debate about water, not water, we're looking at a whole new deployment model. So, not only are we adding different apparatus so that we get the truck in there too, and we get the personnel on the squad units, but we're looking at, Chief Russell has already changed operationally what those units respond to. So those units should be on the lower priority calls to leave the engines in service so that the engines are available for those calls. So in past, we've always flip-flopped, and when you have back-to-back calls, you don't guarantee that you're going to have an engine if you need it for firefighting. You may get a squad. So by adjusting the deployment, our response plans, and adding additional resources to our deployment, we can adjust and cover those areas where we're concerned. And then, like Chief Newberry said, we're not getting rid of the rig. We just operationally, we want to be able to deploy that rig and run that rig at the proper times, rather than run it nonstop. And just a side note, with the squad, we've come to realize with adding Chief Schmidt and Chief Russell to our team, who are more versed in wildland than District 6 has been in the past, is the pump is not capable of what we need it to be for wildland. So we have to make that adjustment in our current squad as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you, Chief Maurer. You're talking about the flip-flop between the squad and the engine. Without the squad having water, are they still going to flip-flop those duties, or is the squad going to run double calls?
So the squad has been transferred to run lower priority calls. So that leaves the engine in service at more times. Is there ever an opportunity where the squad could be the only unit in District 6 and dispatched to a fire? Yeah, sure. It's emergency services, so we never know, where everybody's going to be all the time. But if we look at the data and we run the numbers and we play the numbers and we make smart choices, the squad should be alleviating some of that lower priority engine traffic so that's available for the calls.
Sure. Thank you, Chief.
Somebody must have a computer not muted or something.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to talk slow. It's just hard with the repeating.
Okay, board, is there any other questions concerning apparatus replacement? We'll talk about the CRV later, I'm sure. When do you anticipate going for bid on the engines, Chief?
So Chief Russell and Chief Baum have been working on that. I know they have a really quick timeline, and last I heard it was about 4 months when they want to go out to bid. So they'll be working really hard on that project to get it ready by then.
And then delivery will be 10, 12 months probably after that.
Yeah, it's about a year with COVID right now.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else from the board? Any other questions?
None here.
None here. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close the workshop and move on to our regular Board of Commissioners meeting. And I'm going to call that meeting to order. And I'm going to call for any additions to the agenda, please.
None here.
None here.
Okay, we need to read and approve the minutes of the February 2nd, 2021 meeting and board workshop.
Make a motion.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We did have one piece of correspondence from Dr. Whitwer. I don't know if you all saw that. Was there any other correspondence?
Commissioner Westbeck, I did add one more tonight. Sorry. Sorry, Secretary Taylor. It came in late today.
No
It was
problem.
a thank you note from Vicky Basso, who is the wife of Alan Basso, a Cowlitz County Fire District 5 firefighter who died in the line of duty, and we provided assistance.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, citizen communication. This is the time during our meetings that we open it up for any citizens that may have any questions concerning Fire District 6 business. And realizing that this is virtual, there's a place there on the right on YouTube that you can ask any questions as we go on through the meeting if you have any questions or comments. And those will be brought to our attention as we go forward. So as we move forward, feel free to ask any questions, make any comments, and we'll get back to you. And with that said, we have health and safety report. There's none.
I'm sorry, there is one. Slow to unmute. So health and safety report, we had one firefighter that aggravated a neck injury, a shoulder pain injury while working out. One firefighter suffered a chipped tooth and bump on the head after going into a low area of the tower. They've since remediated that, so we don't do that again. An ankle sprain and a cut thumb. So we had one employee, not line personnel, that was exposed to COVID, and one exposed to smoke while transitioning from an EMS call to a fire call. So there was some discussion about slippery floors in the training tower, so training's looking at that, and they were looking at different warning lights on the reserve engines to be brighter.
Okay. Any questions for the chief?
None here.
None here.
Okay, hearing none. No parade report. Was there a risk management group meeting, Commissioner Piper, since our last meeting?
No, there hasn't been.
Okay, and fairground facility board meeting?
Not yet.
Okay. I will call your attention to the consent agenda. Need a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Chief's report.
So the first in the chief's report is the January 2021 overtime summary report. We were tracking at $97,772.39. The majority of that being shift replacement, called in overtime, and BC callback.
And with the new folks starting, that should go down, right?
Yes, and just as a side note, some of that you will see our overtime tracking high because right now we're paying for those shifts to be covered at the Clark County Fairgrounds, and then they will be reimbursed. So it may look different for the month of February. And
Keep rolling. You're doing great.
okay, and then the budget performance report. So for fire, we anticipate that we should be at 16.6%. We've expended 7.7%, and for EMS, we anticipate that our expenditures should be 16.6%, and we've expended 8.1%. So we're below in both of those.
Excellent.
The COVID-19 update, we're about a week behind in the updates now because things have started to taper off a little bit. So I wanted to give you an update that Captain Simica had put out about EMS providers. So EMS providers in Clark County that have tested positive for COVID-26, with one currently under quarantine, and that's all of Clark County, not District 6. And again, we have had no providers test positive. So it continues to decline with positive and active cases. Currently, Clark County was at 262.2, and that was down from 310 a week ago. Of course, we're doing the vaccinations. We're helping with the clinic, the mass vaccination clinic at the Clark County Fairgrounds. They're still administering around 1,000 per day with the exception of the snow days. Our department has 77% of personnel that have received the first dose and 71% of personnel that have received both doses. So we're doing good on immunizations or vaccinations.
Any questions for the chief?
Done here.
So is this just a herd immunity? Is 70%? Is that what we're looking for?
Well, that's 70% of our personal capacity. So, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
I also had a late addition to the chief's report of the facilities report, and I'm happy to cover that with you, or if you want to read it in your packet too.
Ooh, I didn't get it in my packet, did I?
It was uploaded late.
If you want to go through it real quick, that the public that's listening could hear also.
I said Chief Newberry on the line.
Yes, you do.
Okay. Do you want to cover the facilities update?
I'm happy to. Give me just a second to open it.
See if I got that.
Okay, so at Station 61, as you know, in the last board packet, you saw the rendition of the plans. That's been more solidified, and now we're going through the estimating process. And so, as I'm sure you remember from the last time, the estimating process, the architect and their in-house help goes basically helps us estimate the project, cost of the project. And once that is presented to us, then we'll need help developing our budget for whatever our priorities are. The habitat and wetland areas have been established, and they actually shrunk a little bit from the previous survey that we had done. So that's good because it gives us a little bit more room back in the shop area. And then at Station 61, we had a Spartan Environmental scheduled to come in and scope the storm sewer to see if we had any other problems like we did a couple years ago in front of the truck bay where the culvert had collapsed. So we're going to, before we start committing to budget and things like that, we need to know what that infrastructure looks like to see if we need to replace any more of that pipe and therefore break up a bunch of concrete to do that. So we're just getting all of our ducks in line to make sure that we have all the good information that we can to help create that budget. Station 62, still working on the lighting package upgrade out there. There's a lot of players in that, so it's just trying to coordinate everybody through, COVID and weather and everything. It's just kind of a little bit of a nightmare. So, but we're working on that. Then also at Station 62, the crew out there, 2KG, has finished their work on the north side of the building, the sidewalks and the approaches that need to be replaced. And now they've moved their stuff now to the south side, and they're going to be starting that work tomorrow. So the crews now will switch to the other side of the station, the truck bays anyway, to get out of the station. We have the artwork finalized for 62, and we're meeting with the designer next week to make sure that it all makes sense, and then we'll get that on order. That includes a little bit of furniture as well. Station 63, we've been having the trouble with the trees dying and the grass being full of clover and moss and garbage. And so we have taken steps with the landscaper to remediate the soils and replace all those trees. They also, pro bono, replaced that Japanese maple with a really very nice specimen. And so now our job is to keep it alive. The signs at Station 63 are now all working. Obviously, the front of the building looks absolutely fabulous. The reader board at the roundabout looks fabulous, and the last piece we had was, once we got the tower erected, was getting that final reader board on 134th Street dialed in, and now it has been. And I just wanted to thank Schmidtke, who coordinated that work with Fast Tech and our electrician to make that happen. So that was good work. The training grounds is complete. All the lights have been installed both inside the building and outside the building and in the parking lot back there. So now we're well lit and secure. And finally, I have it on my list of things to reach out to a metal building manufacturer, and it's just been so busy that I just have not got my head wrapped around that one yet. So I have that as a priority to complete in the next couple of weeks.
Speaking of that, Sean, I, for one, there's some nice-looking metal buildings, and there's not some metal buildings that aren't so nice-looking. We've got such a nice-looking facility out there. If you want to do something other than metal that's cost-effective, or if you can do something that's metal that looks really decent, keep that in the back of mind. Are we going to do that separate, or are we going to do that as part of the bid at Station 1? Have you decided?
Well, that's not a decision for me to make, but I've talked to the chief about it. Generally speaking, the metal building fabricators are kind of standalone, and it's not something that we necessarily need a general contractor to manage. And so we were thinking that we would be able, if it is a prefab building and it meets the kind of aesthetics and the needs of the district, and we share that with you also. We don't want this to be some sort of a airport hangar looking, clunker.
Thank you.
If it meets those objectives, then we'll probably manage it ourselves and not put it through the bid with Station 61.
Okay,
So
what about the fuel pumps?
That's a discussion that we're having in staff on where this fuel pumps will be located, whether we have them at all three stations or just at one of the stations. And if so, just at one of the stations, then where? So those are discussions that are ongoing.
Okay.
But yes, we have preliminarily had that in the plan for Station 61.
Okay.
Chief Newberry, Commissioner Collins here. Hey, just a side note. During this last little weather event, we were out of gas locally. So it just happened that there was no gas. You could find diesel. But Fred Meyers and Safeway is a pretty big player in the deal. And so if there was an event that lasted longer than 3 days, you might want to think about having our own reserve.
Yeah, I don't. We're talking about how to handle that. I don't know who's not muted. There you go. I did some discussions with Wilcox and Flagel, who's our gas provider, and because of the status of the emergency service community, basically, we have first dibs on their bills, and we're also on a great rate with them. So it's kind of like the Postal Service. And not that they're not efficient, like maybe the Postal Service arguably isn't, but they come through hell and high water to get fuel to the fire stations. So, but we are evaluating all those things, and we're looking at $125,000 to install a fueling station. It's a pretty big decision to contemplate.
Yeah, I just want to bring it to your attention. As you know, there's supply and demand, and then there's accessibility due to inclement weather. Yeah. So I don't think it was supply and demand. I think it was inaccessibility.
Yeah, I agree.
Chief Newberry, I have two quick questions about the plans for the remodel at Station 1.
Okay.
Number one is, I did not see a fire pole in the drawing. We're going to keep the fire pole?
Yeah, it's actually interesting that you didn't, that it's not in there, because we've talked specifically about that, but it is an important traditional part of our existence, especially considering that fire pole came from the original fire station at Hazelbell, so that's not something we're going to get rid of.
Okay, I just didn't see that. My second question, I would assume that the meeting area, EOC area, on the far west end of the southern wing of the station, it says 20 people, and I don't know what the plan is for our board meetings. If it's good for 20 people, and between staff and the board and the district secretary, we almost take up half that occupancy. And as we know, occasionally we have a hot topic where we know more people are going to show up. Is that going to suffice, or are we going to have to use the training? This is a question for staff, I guess. Or if we're going to have to use the training facility at Station 3, I just don't know if an occupancy is 20 is going to be big enough or not, I guess is my comment.
Well, we've talked a little bit about that, and Chief Maurer wants to pop in, feel free, but we've talked about occupancies on the kind of normal everyday need versus the occasionally, like what you just spoke to. Obviously, the board has the ability at any time that they want to change the location of the board meeting, so that if you did have a hot topic that was going to have a lot of people on site, we could certainly move it to Station 63 in the training room, or we also have the classrooms upstairs, which is less ideal at Station 61, but it is an option. And by and large, for the most part, that size of a building we feel is really adequate, especially since we're limited to the footprint, or I guess maybe it's self-imposed, to the footprint of the building for the remodel, trying to get the most efficient use of the space. I think we just have options, and the board can make that call when they want to, if they want to.
Okay, that makes sense. I think that staying with the footprint is important. I agree with you, especially from financial aspects, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else for Chief Newberry or Chief Maurer on underneath the chief's report?
None here.
None here. Thank you.
Okay. Any old business? There's no old business on the agenda. Is there any old business that needs to be brought up? Hearing none, we're going to move on to new business. Resolution 2021-02, adoption of the 2021 final fire suppression budget.
So in your board packet, it addresses some of the modifications we made from the preliminary budget to the final budget for 2021. So I outlined those for you in a memo. Some modifications were made in salaries to equate for lateral hires and cost of living, same with benefits, little modification to telephones, and then again the same modification for suppression salaries. I'm sorry, that's where the laterals would be, not the top one. Professional services, we increased quite a bit, anticipating for the architectural costs to come out of there for the design services. So we moved $500,000 out of the buildings and put that into professional services. We also have money in professional services because we have been working with the local to get back to a wellness program similar to what we used to have at Portland Adventist, and we're hoping that we move forward in that direction, so we went ahead and budgeted for that. Buildings, you can see we decreased because we just moved it into professional services. Postage, we had to increase for newsletters to go out in the springtime. We did intergovernmental transfer into capital reserves for the anticipation of the engine purchase, and then also for the truck purchase and building expenses. EMS was revised to include fees for service. Fees for service is if we were to do a mobile vaccination clinic, as they're talking about now in the county, that's where we would be reimbursed into. And then the grant indirect is where we'll be reimbursed into from the Clark County Fairgrounds clinic that we're helping with. So that just gives us a line item to put the money back into. Additional EMS modifications that we made, again, a little adjustment to salaries for the laterals and cost of living. The equipment under $5,000 was increased, and that was to cover the Med Knox box vaults that we bought and the board approved a couple meetings ago. And then again, professional services, we pay for those for the paramedic employees. Their wellness expenditures would come out of the EMS budget. So we buffered the professional services in anticipation and hope of getting back to a wellness program. So those are the major changes from the preliminary to the final. Do you have any questions?
Are all the 11 people they all being paid out of the fire budget?
Can you say that one more time, Commissioner Lostberg?
We have reverberation, I'm sorry. The 11 folks right now, recruits, are they being salaries and benefits out of the fire budget or the EMS budget?
No, we have 6 medics, so they're out of the EMS budget, and 5 firefighters, so they're out of the fire budget. So we split them up by certification or classification.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions, we need a motion to approve the resolution.
Commissioner Piper, if you have that in front of you, I'd be happy to second it for you.
You bet. I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2021-02, adoption of the 2021 final fire suppression.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. And then we have 03, if you want to do that one also, please.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2021-03, the 2021 final emergency medical services budget.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to move on to surplus concerning the CRV at this point, I believe.
So we have the Honda CRV in our fleet. It's a 2001 CRV. It's been a great car. The transmission in that vehicle has gone out and it needs to be repaired. The estimate for the repair is $5,284.37. The value of the CRV is $900 to $1,400. Since the cost of repair exceeds the value of the vehicle, we would recommend that we surplus the 2001 Honda CRV at the chief's discretion.
Okay.
So moved.
I'll make a motion to surplus 2001 the CRV at the chief's discretion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So if Tina needs to run down to the courthouse or anything, will there be like a chief's vehicle available for her to use, or how are you going to do that?
Yeah, and actually, most of the day staff uses the chief's cars right now. So, yeah,
Okay.
There's one here for him.
Perfect. Okay, we're going to move on to bachelor's degree approval.
So I put a memo in your board packet regarding this. So the CBA provides for an educational incentive for personnel that have a bachelor's degree. It lists specific classes that are already qualified, and then it allows the board to evaluate whether they feel it's a closely related field and can approve the degree. So last year we developed a strategic plan. Part of that was to have a professional fire service agency that was dedicated to excellence and delivered the best service. We also really had a focus on education in general and have emulated that with the chief staff here. So if you were to give an educational incentive for a BA or a BS degree in the contract now as it speaks, it would be a total of 2.5%. So it'd be 1.5% for associates and additional 1% for a bachelor's degree. So we have 2 new hires that have a bachelor's degree. It's not clearly outlined in the education incentive in Exhibit C in the CBA. So I'm asking if the board would evaluate it and see if they would consider giving the educational premium for those bachelor's degrees. We wouldn't address anything else in the CBA. It outlines pretty specifically what the district will financially back and pay for if a member was to decide to get their bachelor's degree once they had already gotten hired here. So this is just looking at people coming in with bachelor's degrees or maybe people that currently have them. At the bottom of your memo, I gave you a cost breakdown of what those educational incentives look like. And I think all of our staff, like I said, really values education. We see the benefit of having education within the fire service, and we feel we're we're pretty innovative here at District 6 with really supporting not only education and training. So.
I was curious about my fellow commissioners, what their thoughts on it was. I've always wanted to support education and how it benefits the department, and some of them are not exactly job specific, but education as a whole, is a good thing, of course. And our chief is a leader and an educator, by profession, and this is her recommendation, and I want to back her on it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Commissioner Collins. I think there's tremendous value in education. I have no problem.
So just to clarify, Chief, any of our current employees that have a BABS would qualify for this, or is this just the 2 new recruits coming in?
Well, the CBA speaks specifically to it, where anything that's outside of the ones listed in that educational incentive need board approval. So if any members of our department currently hold a bachelor's degree that they weren't getting credit for, we would have them bring that forward. I would bring it back to the board for board approval. But I think one thing to consider is by approving the 2 degrees with the new hires, it does open the door to allow more degrees to be accepted.
This is a tough one for me because I think we're opening up, not a can of worms, but we're opening up to the board is going to have to determine degree by degree by degree. So the next one could be a degree in psychology, a degree in sociology, degree in criminal justice, degree in whatever. And then we'd have to decide every single time if we feel like that fits. Is that what you're asking us?
Well, essentially, yes. But that's how the CBA is written now, that there's, I think, 4 classifications that give them automatic qualifications for the incentive. And then anything outside of those requires board approval for the bachelor's. The chief can approve associates in a closely related field.
So the 2 we're talking about, one is in English and one is in some sort of...
We have a Bachelor of Arts in Exercise Science and a Bachelor of Arts in English.
So you want to add those 2 to the CBA?
Yes, sir. And more than just this, the first 2 years of those graduate degrees are, they're the common classes that everyone gets. And so we just see a big difference in communicating ideas effectively, thinking analytically, understanding complex subjects. So we're looking at that bachelor's degree as a whole rather than looking at the focus.
Is there a way that we, I appreciate what the chief's written here this evening and proposes with this incentive for folks that do bring education and do join Fire District 6, or in fact are working currently in Fire District 6. Is there a way that we can allow this for the chief to approve, or, I'm looking at this at a broader sense with any bachelor's degree should receive this incentive. These folks, like the chief has highlighted in her paper, and what they bring to the table. Is there a way to okay or approve this, just leave this with the chief for discretion, or approve any bachelor's degree?
So Commissioner Pfeiffer, it's this article is in the CBA, so if you were to have it be chief discretion, that would be a negotiated item with the union. It's not saying that we couldn't bring that forward, it's just that has to be negotiated. One thing that we could do is just open it up once a year to come to the board, so that way you guys aren't inundated, every meeting with a request, and we say this time of year you put in your request, and then we bring those forward.
Yeah, I don't see where we're going to be inundated with requests just based upon the total number of employees and how many we hire. I would like to reward the workforce that does come to work here with a degree or currently has has a degree, and so I'm trying to find the most convenient way to make that applicable, and one that would work with the current contract or future contract.
So, Commissioner Pfeiffer, just to clarify, you basically feel anybody we have that has a BA/BS degree, regardless of the field of study, and I agree the field of study is important, but the process is really important too to get there.
Correct.
It would be much easier just to say, if you have, because this is going to keep coming back to us. The chief is going to have to deal with this with people coming forward to her. She's going to have to bring it to us. We're going to have to decide if degree in sociology is effective, which I think it probably is. And I don't know how many folks we have that have degrees that don't meet the current CBA. I imagine there isn't we're talking about very many at this point. And
the current incentive is for the chief's proposed current incentive looks to be 17 total personnel.
But that
I can't confirm that we've ever denied somebody's bachelor's degree, but Tina and I can't remember a time when a bachelor's degree was denied.
But those are bachelor's degrees that meet the contract, not, if somebody has a bachelor's degree in sociology, they probably never brought it forward because it's not in the contract. That's what I'm saying. I don't know how many else out there are besides the 17. Is there 2 or 3 or 4? I don't know.
There's 2 that we've approved outside the language of the contract, and one had to do with physical education type focus, and then the other one was more of a chemistry environmental focus. Those are the only 2 I know that we've approved outside of the list.
So we could have some employees with degrees in psychology or sociology or anthropology or whatever that aren't currently counted among the 17. Is that true?
That could be a possibility, yes.
Okay. I just don't want to have to, I don't know. I personally think a 4-year degree, people have had to step forward. They've had classes in English, they've had classes in psychology, they've had classes in math, they've had classes in whatever. And, a degree in PE, maybe they haven't taken any English, maybe, or writing skills. I mean, it just depends on the focus of study versus the process. And I don't know if this is a negotiable item that needs to be brought up in negotiations, if the board just wants to reward those folks that currently have a degree in whatever, or do you want it to be specific? I guess that's my question to the board.
I can appreciate what Chief Maurer has written out here about the process behind education. And, I don't see that we have a member with a PE degree, but that would be an education degree more than likely. So I think that there are general requirements to acquire a bachelor's degree, and there are specialty requirements to obtain a chemistry degree, right? But the general stuff is always what's done, and this is going to help develop a workforce that is able to be the future chiefs and leaders of this organization, and I think that's important. And in order, even for a person to promote throughout their career, education will be of importance.
So, what about labor? In your labor management discussion, how are they about this subject, and how far out until we renegotiate? And should we wait until that point to clean up, the question and make it crystal clear from here on out? I mean, I don't know.
So, speak briefly about it in labor management this morning. It's important to me that I present any ideas or questions to the board before I fully present them to anybody else. So I want you guys to hear about it first. So it wasn't discussed into this detail. The contract does say that you can approve that educational incentive for a closely related field, and my argument was that all of the education of that bachelor's degree helps in this field. If the board were wanting to do anything differently, like say, for example, you wanted to approve any BA, BS degree, or you wanted the chief to have authority to do it, that's a change in contract language. And then at that point, we would notify the local and start those discussions. As far as when we go into negotiations, that will start this summer. And it takes a while to get through those, so I wouldn't anticipate a new contract before early next year. Or by early next year.
Do you think they'll bargain hard for this?
Well, sometimes we don't want to bargain against ourselves, right? But we've come out as a staff to say what our core values, and those are professional value education. So it's hard for me to have those core values and not support this.
Yeah, that's well stated, Chief. I appreciate your analogy on that.
Chief, is there a way for you to, I guess, to get us through where we currently are? Is there a way we can find support for what we have here, and then for you to, work with the local through your labor management process? I think that perhaps, Vice President Reese, Unit Vice President Taylor, it seems like this would be something that the local is not going to oppose.
Yeah, I mean, that would all, of course, have to be a discussion with the local. Like I said, we didn't get that deep into the discussion, and this could be, we could put this on hold, and I could bring it to labor management, and we can go from there. As far as, the two personnel that have the degrees, there's always the option to backdate it to their hire date. So, if the process were that we wanted to go through the labor management process, bring it back to the board could always choose to backdate it.
Okay.
Or not.
What's your choice, gentlemen?
Well, I'm hearing either go ahead and approve it and backdate it and kind of set the precedent, or let it work itself out in negotiations. But I kind of getting recommendations from the chief that she wants it and thinks it's very important for the organization, and so I want to support it.
Yeah, I would agree with Commissioner Collins. I would like to find a way that the chief can continue these discussions with the local. And I think that there's probably a reasonable fix.
So our direction to the chief is to take it to labor management and get feedback there. Is that what you guys are saying?
That works for me, because otherwise it's one-sided.
I think that seems very fair, and we'll present the same documentation to the local that you have in your board packet, and we can open those discussions.
Okay.
I would appreciate that. I know you kind of wanted a decision tonight, but I think we need to take a look at these and which ones are relevant, which ones aren't, or it's going to be a can of worms forever. So I appreciate your patience with us.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's something we haven't dealt with yet before, so it's good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not like you don't have support for it. I think it's about how you get there.
I appreciate that.
Okay, did we have any questions or questions come in on YouTube we need to address?
No, there were not.
Thank you, David. We do not need an executive session, so I'm going to do a roundtable good of order.
I have a short list if the board is okay with me sharing.
Please.
For the training tower, we needed a burn pan to help catch some of the burn waste, and Advanced Welding in our fire district donated a burn pan for the training tower. So I just wanted to thank them, and we'll thank them formally as well, but I wanted to notify the board.
That was very nice.
Yeah. Also, you probably saw on email, but last week, Travis Dick, who's a firefighter here, stepped down from the logistics position. He's been filling that position for 10 years, and we have some of the best safety equipment because of what Travis has done. So we just wanted to thank Travis for his service, and we'll move forward with that process. Another thing is, I know we all know that we had snow this weekend, and I just want to thank the crews. I know we've seen pictures and I've read the reports, and a lot of times they had to really think outside the box to make things happen. And I just think they do a great job taking care of the public no matter what the circumstances are. So wanted to thank them. We're entering week 4 of the COVID clinic. Our contract that we signed was for 6 weeks, so Chief Russell's working with them to see where we land with that. And then the last thing is we've had 3 drive-bys that we've been doing, drive-bys in a good way, but one was for a birthday for Andrew White, who's a 40-year-old longtime resident employee at Chuck's Produce, who we did a drive-by for. Bill Lee, who's a retired firefighter from here, we did a drive-by for his birthday. And Saturday we have what we're calling a special sting. It's a surprise to the person involved in it, so we'll do another event Saturday. But we're staying busy with the drive-bys and public events.
Excellent. That's important stuff.
And that was all I had for good of the order.
Thank you, Chief. Do the board members have anything?
The governor opened up our region for more activity, and the numbers are good, and I'm happy for that.
Yeah, that is a good thing.
Okay, anything else? Hearing none, we would authorize February issuance of payroll warrants. Authorize payroll direct deposit. Authorize February deposit. Authorize pre-authorization invoice transmittals, and authorize payment of current bills.
So moved.
Second.
Moving to second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. And with that said, meeting will be adjourned.
Good night, everybody. Be safe.
Thanks. Be safe.
Hey, Mike. Thank you.